The November wind cut through the Colorado territory like a rusty blade, carrying with it the promise of an early winter. Judge Samuel Whitmore stood at his study window, watching the last leaves surrender to autumn's grip. The telegram in his hand trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the weight of its message. You sent 6 of our boys to the gallows. Now it's your turn to lose what you love most. It had been 3 weeks since the trial. The Cimarron gang had terrorized the frontier for years, robbing banks, burning homesteads, leaving widows and orphans in their wake. When federal marshals finally brought them to justice, Samuel had presided over what newspapers called the trial of the decade. The verdict was swift, the sentence final. 6 ropes. 6 lives ended on a cold October morning. Now the 7th member, who'd escaped capture, wanted blood for blood. Samuel turned from the window to face his daughter. Clara sat by the fireplace, her needlework forgotten in her lap as she read a book of poetry. 22 years old, with her mother's auburn hair and his own stubborn chin, she was the light of his remaining days. Elizabeth had died bringing her into the world, and Samuel had raised her with the help of governesses and his own fumbling attempts at tenderness. "Clara," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. "We need to speak." She looked up, green eyes catching the firelight. "Father, you look troubled." He crossed the room and sat beside her, taking her hands in his. They were soft, uncalloused, city hands that had never known hard labor. "I'm sending you away for a while, to stay with a friend." "Away?" Her brow furrowed. "But the Hendersons' winter ball is next month, and I promised Charlotte, this isn't about social engagements." He squeezed her hands gently. "There have been threats against me, against you." The color drained from her face. "The trial?" "Yes." He released her hands and stood, pacing before the fire. "I have arranged for you to stay at Stone Ridge Ranch, near the New Mexico border. It's remote, safe. The foreman there, Jed Hartwell, is a man I trust. He'll see to your protection until we can be certain the danger has passed." "A ranch?" Clara's voice pitched higher. "Father, I don't know the first thing about—" "You'll learn." His tone brooked no argument. "You leave at dawn. Pack practical clothes. This isn't Denver society. Clara, where you're going, survival matters more than etiquette." She rose, the book sliding to the floor. "How long?" "As long as it takes." He pulled her into an embrace. Rare for him. "I couldn't bear to lose you too." The journey to Stone Ridge took 3 days. Clara sat rigid in the stagecoach, her traveling dress already dusty and wrinkled. The landscape changed dramatically as they moved south, from Denver's civilized streets to endless plains. Then to rough hill country, where massive rock formations jutted from the earth like ancient sentinels. Her fellow passengers were a rough lot. A traveling preacher who smelled of whiskey, 2 miners heading to the silver fields, and a woman whose profession Clara didn't care to guess. They eyed her city clothes with a mixture of amusement and disdain. On the second night, they stopped at a way station that barely deserved the name. Clara slept sitting up, her back against the wall, jumping at every sound. Coyotes howled in the distance, and something large snuffled around outside. When dawn finally came, she was exhausted and filthy, her carefully pinned hair escaping in wild tendrils. "Stone Ridge," the driver called out on the 3rd afternoon. Clara peered through the window. The ranch sprawled across a valley between 2 ridges of red rock, a collection of log buildings that looked as if they'd grown from the earth itself. Smoke rose from chimneys, and she could see figures moving among the corrals where horses milled about. The coach lurched to a stop in front of the main house. Clara gathered her courage and stepped down, her legs unsteady after days of constant motion. The altitude made her lightheaded, and the air was thin and sharp with the scent of pine and horse. "Miss Whitmore?" She turned. The man who'd spoken stood a few feet away, and her first thought was that he looked like he'd been carved from the same stone as the ridges, tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in days. His clothes were practical, worn denim, leather chaps, a coat that had seen better decades, But it was his eyes that held her attention, gray as winter sky and just as cold. "Mr. Hartwell?" He nodded once, economical with even that small gesture. "Your father sent word. Said you'd be staying a spell." "Yes, She stopped, suddenly aware of how she must look. Her emerald traveling dress was ridiculously impractical, her soft leather boots already scuffed. "I appreciate your hospitality." Something flickered in those gray eyes. Amusement? Disdain? "This ain't a hotel. Miss Whitmore, it's a working ranch. We rise before dawn. Work till dark. No fancy meals. No servants to wait on you." Heat flooded her cheeks. "I don't expect special treatment." "Good." He turned to the driver. Her bags. While they unloaded her trunks, far too many. She realized now. Clara took in her surroundings. The main house was sturdy but basic, built of logs chinked with mud. A few smaller cabins scattered nearby, presumably for the ranch hands. In the distance, she could see cattle dotting the hillsides like scattered seeds. "This way," Hartwell said, hefting one of her trunks as if it weighed nothing. She followed him into the house. The interior was sparse but clean. Rough wooden floors, simple furniture, a massive stone fireplace that dominated one wall. It smelled of wood smoke and leather and something indefinably male. "Your room." He pushed open a door to reveal a small chamber with a narrow bed, a washstand, and pegs on the wall for clothes. One window looked out toward the eastern ridge. Clara bit back her dismay. Her dressing room in Denver was larger. "Thank you, it's fine." He set down the trunk with a thud. "Supper's at 6. Kitchen's through there. We eat together. Me, you, and whatever hands aren't out on the range. Don't be late." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. This ain't Denver. We got bears, wolves, rattlesnakes. Weather can turn deadly fast. You don't wander off alone. You don't go out after dark. And you sure as hell, pardon me, you don't act like you know better than folks who've lived here all their lives." "Clear." Clara lifted her chin. "Perfectly." He studied her for a long moment, then left without another word. Alone. Clara sank onto the hard bed. What had her father been thinking? This man clearly resented her presence, saw her as nothing but a burden. The room was cold, the wind rattling the window in its frame. She could hear men shouting outside, the bawling of cattle, the neigh of horses. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt truly alone. Supper was an ordeal. Clara had changed into her simplest dress, still far too fine for the surroundings, and found her way to the kitchen. 4 men sat around a scarred wooden table, including Hartwell. They rose when she entered. Hats quickly snatched off heads, but their expressions ranged from curious to skeptical. "Boys, this is Miss Whitmore," Hartwell said. "She'll be staying with us for a time. Miss Whitmore, this is Tom, Eddie, and Moses." She nodded, attempting a smile. "Pleased to meet you." They mumbled responses and sat back down. An older Mexican woman ladled beans and cornbread onto plates without ceremony. The food was plain but hearty, and Clara realized she was ravenous. Conversation was sparse, mostly about work that needed doing, fences to mend, strays to round up, preparations for winter. Clara ate in silence, keenly aware of being the only woman at the table besides the cook, who disappeared after serving. "You right, Miss Whitmore." This from Tom, the youngest of the hands, who couldn't have been more than 17. Yes, some." She'd had lessons, of course. Gentle rides through Denver's parks on placid mares. "Good," Hartwell said. "You'll need to. Can't get anywhere around here on foot. I brought my riding habit." Eddie, grizzled and weathered, snorted. "Riding habit? That's rich." Heat flooded her cheeks again. "Is there something amusing?" "No offense, Miss." Moses, a large black man with kind eyes, said gently, "But what passes for riding clothes in the city won't last a day out here. You'll need proper gear." "I see." She set down her fork. "Then perhaps someone could advise me on what's proper. I'll handle it," Hartwell said curtly. Tom, you got first watch tonight. Eddie, Moses, we're moving the herd to the south pasture come morning. The meal concluded quickly after that, the men dispersing to their various duties. Clara began gathering plates, determined to be useful. Leave it, Hartwell ordered. I'm perfectly capable of... I said leave it. His tone was sharp. Lupita will handle the cleaning. Clara's temper flared. Mr. Hartwell, I'm not accustomed to being spoken to like a child. And I'm not accustomed to nursemaiding city women who don't know a stirrup from a cinch. He stood, towering over her. Your father asked me to keep you safe. Can't do that if you're determined to prove something that don't need proving. And what exactly do you think I'm trying to prove? That you belong here. His gray eyes were steady, uncompromising. You don't. The sooner we both accept that, the easier this'll be. The words stung more than they should have. Clara drew herself up to her full height, which still left her looking up at him. You don't know me. Mr. Hartwell. No, he agreed. And I don't need to. You're here temporary. I'll keep you breathing till it's safe for you to go home. That's all. He left her standing there, anger and hurt warring in her chest. Through the window, she watched him stride across the yard toward the barn, his movements sure and purposeful, a man completely at home in this harsh landscape, as much a part of it as the red rocks and endless sky. And she was an interloper, a hothouse flower transplanted to rocky soil. The wind picked up outside, howling through the valley like a living thing. Clara shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. Somewhere in the darkness, a wolf howled, answered by another, then another, until the night filled with their wild chorus. For the first time in her life, Clara Whitmore understood what it meant to be prey. The first snow came early that year, dusting the ridges white while the valley still clung to autumn's browns and golds. Clara woke to find frost etching patterns on her window, her breath visible in the cold room. 3 weeks had passed since her arrival at Stone Ridge. 3 weeks of awkward meals, curt exchanges with Hartwell, and failed attempts to find her place in this alien world. She dressed quickly in the practical clothes Moses had helped her acquire from the general store in the nearest town. Canvas trousers, a flannel shirt, sturdy boots. Her hands, once soft as silk, now bore blisters from attempting to help with chores despite Hartwell's disapproval. The kitchen was already warm when she entered, Lupita stirring something on the massive stove. The older woman smiled and handed her a cup of coffee without being asked. They'd developed an understanding. Communication through gestures and simple Spanish phrases Clara was slowly learning. Where is everyone? Clara asked. Senor Jed, he take the men to move cattle. Storm coming. Lupita gestured toward the window. Maybe very bad. Clara sipped her coffee, watching through the window as snow began falling in earnest. She could just make out riders in the distance, dark shapes against the whitening landscape, driving cattle toward lower ground. By afternoon, the snow had become a blizzard. Clara paced the house, unable to shake a growing unease. The men should have returned by now. She'd learned enough about ranch life to know that being caught in a storm could be deadly. They know these mountains, Lupita assured her, but Clara caught the worry in her eyes. Night fell early. The world outside transformed into a howling white void. Clara kept vigil by the window, straining to see through the storm. Then, movement. A single rider, hunched against the wind. She ran to the door, throwing it open. Snow drove horizontally, stinging her face. The rider, Tom, half fell from his horse. Miss Clara. His face was blue with cold. Mr. Hartwell, he went after strays. His horse spooked. Threw him. Can't find him in the storm. Her heart stopped. Where? Near Devil's Canyon. Moses and Eddie are still searching, but... Clara was already moving, grabbing her coat. Saddle a fresh horse. Miss, you can't... Do it! The command in her voice surprised them both. And bring rope, blankets, anything warm. Tom hesitated, then ran for the barn. Clara turned to Lupita. Heat water, prepare bandages. When we return, we'll need them. Minutes later, She was mounted on a sturdy mare, Tom leading the way back into the storm. The wind tried to tear her from the saddle, snow blinding her, but she gripped with her knees and followed Tom's shadow. Devil's Canyon was a gash in the earth, its edges treacherous even in good weather. Now, with snow obscuring everything, it was a death trap. They found Moses and Eddie searching along the rim, shouting Hartwell's name into the wind. He was chasing a yearling. Eddie yelled over the storm. "Horse lost footing." Clara dismounted, grabbed the rope from her saddle. "Hold this, I'm going down." "Miss Whitmore, no!" Moses grabbed her arm. "You don't know. I know he'll die if we don't find him." She shook free. "I'm the lightest. I have the best chance." Before they could stop her, she was over the edge, rappelling down into the canyon. The rock was slick with ice, her hands numb even through her gloves. 20 feet down, then 30. The wind seemed less fierce here, blocked by the canyon walls. "Hartwell," she called. "Jed, nothing but the wind's echo." She continued down, fighting panic. Then a dark shape against the snow, a horse, unmoving, and beyond it, Jed. He lay crumpled against a boulder, unconscious, snow already beginning to bury him. Clara reached him, her hands shaking as she checked for signs of life. There, a pulse, weak but steady. Blood matted his dark hair where his head had struck rock. "I found him," she screamed up. "He's alive. Send down blankets." Working with desperate efficiency, she wrapped him in the blankets they lowered, then secured the rope around him. The men above hauled him up while she climbed alongside, guiding his body away from the rocky walls. By the time they got him to the top, he was semi-conscious, muttering incoherently. The ride back to the ranch was a nightmare. Clara held Jed in front of her on the horse, his body a dead weight against hers, while Tom led the way through the storm. She could feel him shivering, a good sign when the shivering stopped. Death wasn't far behind. They burst into the ranch house in a flurry of snow and urgent voices. Clara directed the men to carry Jed to his room. She'd never seen it before. Noted absently that it was as spare as the man himself. While Lupita heated water, Clara began cutting away his frozen clothes with steady hands. "Miss, that ain't proper," Eddie began. "Propriety be damned." Clara snapped, "Get out if you're squeamish." The men fled. Clara and Lupita worked together, stripping Jed down to assess his injuries. The head wound was ugly, but not deep. His left shoulder was dislocated, bruises already blooming across his ribs. But it was the cold that worried her most. His skin was like ice. "We need to warm him slowly," Clara said, remembering something she'd read. Too fast and his heart could stop. They wrapped him in layers of blankets, placed hot water bottles at his feet and sides. Clara sat beside the bed, monitoring his breathing, his pulse. Hours passed. The storm raged on. Gradually, his skin lost its deathly pallor. The violent shivering began, a sign his body was fighting back. Near dawn, his eyes opened, gray as winter sky, but confused, unfocused. "Easy," Clara murmured, placing a hand on his chest as he tried to sit up. "You're safe." He blinked, struggling to focus on her face. "Clara?" "Yes?" She was surprised he'd used her first name. "You had a fall. Do you remember?" He frowned, then winced as the movement pulled at his head wound. "The yearling." Storm came up fast. "Your horse threw you into Devil's Canyon. You're lucky to be alive." His gaze sharpened, taking in the situation, him in bed, her sitting beside him in blood-stained clothes. You came after me?" "Someone had to." She tried for lightness, failed. "The men were searching, but I couldn't just wait." Something shifted in his expression. That was foolish. "Yes," she agreed. "It was." They looked at each other for a long moment. Then his hand moved, covering hers where it still rested on his chest. His fingers were rough, calloused, but gentle. "Thank you," he said quietly. Clara felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back. "Rest now. Lupita's making broth. You need to eat. Regain your strength." She started to rise, but his grip tightened. "Stay. Just for a bit." So she stayed, watching as he drifted back to sleep, his hand still covering hers. Outside, the storm was breaking, weak sunlight filtering through the clouds. In that quiet moment, something fundamental had changed between them, as irreversible as the turning of seasons. Jed recovered slowly. The first few days, he was weak as a kitten, frustrated by his body's betrayal. Clara tended him with a mixture of competence and stubbornness that alternately amused and irritated him. "I can feed myself," he growled when she appeared with another bowl of Lupita's soup. "You can barely lift your arm with that shoulder." She settled beside the bed with the bowl. "Stop being prideful. I've been taking care of myself since I was 15, and look where that got you." She lifted the spoon to his lips. "Eat." He ate, glaring at her the whole time, but Clara noticed the glares lacked their former coldness. Sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher, part wonder, part wariness, part something else that made her pulse quicken. On the fourth day, he insisted on getting up. Clara helped him to a chair by the window, noting how he tried to minimize contact between them, how his jaw tightened when her hands necessarily touched his bare skin. "Tell me about your family," she said, settling into the chair across from him. His expression closed. "Nothing to tell?" "Everyone has family." "Not everyone." He stared out at the snow-covered landscape. "My folks died when I was young. Raised myself, mostly." "I'm sorry." He shrugged, then winced as the movement pulled his shoulder. "Long time ago." Clara studied his profile, the strong jaw, the lines around his eyes that spoke of sun and wind and hardship. "Is that how you got this?" She reached out, fingers barely brushing the long scar that ran along his collarbone. He caught her wrist, not roughly, but firmly. "Don't. I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Some things are better left buried." "Clara." His voice was low, dangerous, but he didn't release her wrist, and she could feel his pulse beneath her fingers. Rapid and unsteady. They stayed frozen like that for a moment that stretched like taffy. Then he let go, turning back to the window. "Storm's passing. I need to check on the herd. You need to rest. I need to do my job." He struggled to stand, and she was there instantly, supporting him. For a moment, they were close, closer than propriety allowed. She could smell soap and leather and something uniquely him. His breath stirred her hair. "Jed," she whispered. He pulled away, almost roughly. "This is a bad idea." "What is—" "You, me, this." He gestured vaguely between them. "You're going back to Denver when this is over, back to your fancy dresses and society balls and men who own banks instead of cattle. I'm just keeping you safe until then." The words stung. "You don't know what I want. I know what you deserve." His gray eyes were fierce. "And it ain't a broken-down ranch foreman with more past than future." He limped from the room before she could respond, leaving Clara standing there with her heart racing and her mind in turmoil. She pressed her fingers to her lips, remembering the way he'd said her name in the darkness, the way his hand had covered hers. Outside, the sun broke fully through the clouds, setting the snow ablaze with light. But Clara felt cold, suddenly understanding that the storm inside her was just beginning. That evening, she found him in the barn, checking on the horses despite her protests that he should be resting. He moved stiffly, favoring his injured side, but with the same quiet competence she'd come to admire. "You should have let Tom do this," she said from the doorway. He didn't turn. "My job, my responsibility? Your stubbornness will get you killed one day. Maybe." He ran his hand along a mare's flank, checking for injuries from the storm. "But not today." Clara entered the barn, breathing in the familiar sense of hay and horse and leather. "I'm not going back." That made him turn. "What?" "To Denver. When this is over. I'm not going back." The words surprised her even as she said them, but she knew they were true. "I can't. Not after. After what? His voice was carefully neutral. After this, after seeing what life can be when it's stripped down to what matters. After... She stopped, gathered her courage. After knowing you. He was across the barn floor before she could blink, backing her against a stall door. Don't... His voice was rough. Don't say things you don't mean. I mean every word. You don't know me, Clara. You don't know what I've done. Where I've been. Then tell me. For a moment, she thought he might. His eyes searched hers, and she saw the war in them, the desire to confess battling with the need to protect. Then he stepped back, the mask sliding back into place. Get back to the house. It's getting dark. But Clara had learned stubbornness from him. I'll go when you go. They stared at each other across the lantern-lit space. Finally, he laughed, a short, harsh sound. You're going to be the death of me, woman. I saved your life, remember? Yeah, he said softly. You did. This time when he moved toward her, it was slower, more deliberate. He raised his hand to her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. You should be afraid of me. I'm not. You should be. His hand slid into her hair, pins scattering. I'm not a good man. Clara, I've done things. I don't care. You should. But then his mouth was on hers, and she didn't care about anything except the heat of him, the way his arms came around her like he was drowning and she was the only solid thing in the world. The kiss was desperate, hungry. Years of loneliness and pain poured into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. This doesn't change anything. You're still going back. We'll see about that, Clara whispered. He kissed her again, softer this time, then stepped away. Come on, before they send a search party. They walked back to the house in silence, but Clara noticed he kept her close, his hand occasionally touching her elbow, her back, as if assuring himself she was real. The night was clear and cold, stars beginning to pierce the darkening sky. At the house, he stopped her before she could enter. Clara, what happened in the barn? Was perfect. She finished. He shook his head, but she caught the ghost of a smile. You're impossible. And you're injured. Go rest. Yes, ma'am. But as she watched him walk to his room, Clara knew neither of them would be getting much rest. Something had been set in motion, inevitable as an avalanche. Whether it would bury them or set them free remained to be seen. In her room, she touched her lips, still feeling the burn of his kiss. Through her window, she could see fresh snow beginning to fall, gentle this time. Somewhere in the darkness, a wolf howled, not threatening now, but lonely, calling for its mate. Clara understood the feeling perfectly. The signs were subtle at first. Fresh horse tracks where none should be. A fence line cut in the dead of night. The dogs barking at shadows that shouldn't exist. Jed noticed everything, but said nothing, his jaw growing tighter with each passing day. Clara watched him checking his rifle more frequently, saw how his hand never strayed far from the Colt at his hip. The easy warmth that had grown between them since their kiss in the barn became edged with tension. He was pulling away again, rebuilding walls she'd worked so hard to breach. Something's wrong. She confronted him one morning as he saddled his horse. The pre-dawn air was bitter cold, their breath forming clouds between them. Nothing for you to worry about. He didn't meet her eyes. Don't lie to me, Jed. His hand stilled on the cinch. Stay close to the house today. Don't ride out alone. Tell me what's happening. He turned then, and she saw fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. Just promise me, Clara, stay close to the house. She promised, but the unease that had been growing for days crystallized into dread. That night, she woke to find her window open, curtains billowing in the frozen wind. She knew she'd latched it before bed. Heart pounding. She lit a lamp. Everything seemed normal, but then she saw it. A playing card on her pillow. The ace of spades, with a bullet hole through its center. She found Jed in the kitchen, fully dressed despite the late hour, cleaning his rifle by lamplight. He looked up when she entered, took in her pale face and the card in her trembling hand. "Pack your things," he said quietly. "I'm taking you to town at first light." "No." She set the card on the table between them. "Someone was in my room. Someone who's trying to frighten me. Or you." His face was stone, but she saw the muscle jump in his jaw. "This isn't your fight." "It is now." She sat across from him. "Who are they? Jed? What do they want?" For a long moment, he was silent. Then, "Old ghosts. Nothing to do with you." "Everything to do with me if they're using me to get to you." She reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. "Trust me, please." He stared at their joined hands, and she felt him trembling, just barely. "I can't." "Why?" "Because if you knew," he pulled his hand away, "you'd run, and you'd be right to." But Clara was done running. That night, after Jed had gone back to his vigilant watch, she did something she'd never done before. She searched his room. What she found there changed everything. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard was an old leather satchel. Inside, yellowed wanted posters, newspaper clippings, and a photograph of a younger Jed standing with a beautiful dark-haired woman. But the name on the posters wasn't Jed Hartwell. It was Jake Morgan, wanted for robbery, cattle rustling, and suspected murder. Member of the notorious Cimarron gang. Clara's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, papers scattered around her. The Cimarron gang, the same outlaws her father had sentenced to hang. "Now you know?" She looked up to find Jed in the doorway, his face unreadable in the lamplight. "You're one of them," she whispered. "The gang my father was," his voice was flat, "dead. I left 10 years ago, before they turned killer." "But you were there. You robbed—" "Yes." He entered the room, knelt to gather the scattered papers. "Banks, stages, cattle. Never killed anyone. But I might as well have. The gang did, after I left, using methods I taught them." Clara watched him handle the wanted posters like they were poisonous. "Why did you leave?" He held up the photograph. "Her name was Mary, schoolteacher in Amarillo. I thought I could have both lives, outlaw and husband, but the gang followed me there. There was a shootout." His voice broke. "She died in the crossfire 3 days before our wedding." "Jed." "Jake," he corrected harshly. "Jake Morgan, thief, outlaw, the man responsible for an innocent woman's death." "You didn't kill her." "I might as well have." He stood, pacing like a caged animal. "I brought that life to her doorstep, just like I've brought it to yours." Clara rose, unsteady. "The card. Someone knows who you are." "The 7th member of the gang, the one who escaped your father's justice. He must have figured out where you were, that I was here." His laugh was bitter. "Poetic justice. I keep the judge's daughter safe while my past comes to collect its due. We need to tell my father." "No." He gripped her shoulders. "You're leaving. Tonight, I'll take you." "I'm not going anywhere." She pulled free. "And neither are you." "Clara, you don't understand. If he tells the law who I am, then we face it together." "There is no together." The words exploded from him. "Don't you see? I'm everything your father stands against, everything you should despise. I'm a criminal, Clara, a man with blood on his hands." "You're the man who saved my life in a blizzard, who tends injured calves and helps widows in town, who spent 10 years trying to atone. There is no atonement for what I've done. I don't believe that." She stepped closer, saw him tense. "And I don't think you believe it either." "What I believe doesn't matter. The law be damned." The profanity shocked them both. "You're not that man anymore." "I'll always be that man." His voice was agonized. "Every day, I see Mary's face. Every night, I dream of gunfire. And now you're in danger because of choices I made a lifetime ago." Clara made her own choice then. She crossed the space between them, framed his face with her hands. "I'm in danger because evil men want to hurt my father, not because of you." "Clara." I love you. The words hung between them like a challenge. He went absolutely still. You don't, he said finally. You can't. I do. I love Jed Hartwell, who is gruff and honorable and protects what's his. I love Jake Morgan, who made terrible choices and has spent every day since trying to make amends. I love all of you, broken pieces and all. Stop. The word was tortured. Please. But she was done stopping. She pulled his head down, kissed him with all the fierce certainty in her heart. For a moment, he resisted, then surrendered with a groan, crushing her against him. When they broke apart, both were shaking. This is wrong, he muttered against her hair. This is the only thing that's been right since I got here. A sound outside made them both freeze. Horses moving fast. Jed pushed Clara behind him, drew his gun in one smooth motion. Stay here, he ordered. But she followed him to the window. In the moonlight, 3 riders approached the house, even from a distance. She could see the glint of metal. Is it him? She whispered. Maybe. Or bounty hunters. Or both. He checked his ammunition with steady hands. Either way, this ends tonight. Jed! He turned, pulled her close for one fierce kiss. Whatever happens, know this, meeting you was the one good thing in my sorry life. Now get to your room, bar the door, and don't come out no matter what you hear. I won't hide while you— Yes, you will. His gray eyes were fierce. Because if something happens to you, I've got no reason left to fight. Please, Clara, for me. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the love he'd never voiced. Be careful. Always am. But as she ran for her room, Clara knew careful wouldn't be enough. Not tonight. She barred her door as ordered, then immediately went to her window. In the yard below, Jed stood alone, waiting. The riders had stopped just outside the fence line. Jake Morgan, the voice carried clear in the cold air. Been a long time, brother. Brother. Clara's blood chilled. Family bonds in the outlaw world ran deeper than blood. Not long enough, Will, Jed called back. The lead rider laughed. 10 years you've been hiding. Took me a while to track you down. But then I heard about the judge's pretty daughter disappearing right after the trial. Figured someone had to be keeping her safe. Who better than a reformed outlaw trying to wash the blood off his hands? Leave her out of this. Can't do that. See, your judge killed 6 of our boys. Only fair he loses something precious too. Then you'll have to go through me. That was always the plan. The shot came without warning. Clara bit back a scream as Jed dove, rolled, came up firing. The yard erupted in gunfire. Glass shattered somewhere below. Men shouted. Horses screamed. Clara couldn't stand it. She grabbed the derringer her father had given her, unbarred her door, and ran for the stairs. In the main room, she found Moses and Eddie taking cover, firing through broken windows. Miss Clara, get back, Moses shouted. But she was already at the window, searching for Jed. She found him behind the water trough, trading shots with 2 men who'd taken cover behind the barn. Blood darkened his sleeve. He'd been hit. One of the outlaws made a break for the house. Without thinking, Clara raised her derringer and fired. The man stumbled, clutched his shoulder, and retreated. Seems your woman has teeth. Jake, Will called out, laughing. Just like Mary did, before she died. Clara saw Jed go rigid, saw the moment rage overtook reason. He rose from cover, advancing on Will's position with deadly purpose. Jed, no, she screamed. Too late. Will's shot took him in the chest, spinning him around. He fell to his knees, gun dropping from nerveless fingers. The world went red. Clara was out the door before anyone could stop her, running across the yard as bullets whined past. She reached Jed as he toppled forward, caught him, lowered him to the ground. You fool, she sobbed, pressing her hands to the wound. Blood seeped between her fingers, hot and terrifyingly fast. You damned fool. Clara. His voice was weak, confused. Told you. Stay inside. Shut up, just shut up and breathe. Around them, the gunfight continued, but Clara was aware of nothing but Jed's gray eyes, already growing dim, and the blood that wouldn't stop flowing. Love you? he whispered. Sorry, so sorry. Don't you dare die on me, Jake Morgan. Don't you dare. But she could feel him slipping away, see the light fading from his eyes. In the distance, she heard new gunfire, different guns, and Will's voice cursing, then hoofbeats, racing away. The law's here, someone shouted. They're running. Clara didn't care. She held Jed, Jake, whoever he was. She held him and willed him to live, even as his blood soaked into the cold ground beneath them. Please, she whispered to any god who might be listening. Please don't take him. Not now. Not when I just found him. In the east, dawn was breaking, painting the sky the color of blood and redemption. But Clara saw none of it. Her world had narrowed to the man in her arms and the prayer on her lips. Stay with me, stay with me, stay with me. The doctor from town worked through the morning, extracting the bullet while Clara held Jed's hand and whispered prayers she hadn't said since childhood. When it was over, Doctor, Morrison was grave. He's lost a lot of blood. The next 48 hours will tell. He wiped his hands on a bloody cloth. Keep him warm, get fluids in him if he wakes, and pray. Clara hadn't left Jed's side in 3 days. She'd fought off Moses and Eddie when they'd tried to relieve her, ignored Lupita's pleas to rest. She bathed his fevered face, dripped water between his cracked lips, and talked until her voice was hoarse, about anything, everything, desperate to anchor him to life. The federal marshals took Will and his men, she told his unconscious form. They're wanted for the bank robbery last month. Among other things, Tom says they'll hang for certain. No response. His breathing was shallow, skin pale as parchment. I wrote to my father, told him everything. About you, about Jake Morgan, about how you saved my life more than once. I told him I won't return to Denver without you. Still nothing. Clara squeezed his hand, fighting tears. Outside, snow fell softly, blanketing the evidence of violence in pristine white. On the 4th morning, she woke from an exhausted doze to find gray eyes watching her. You look terrible, Jed rasped. Clara burst into tears, then immediately started hitting him, gentle taps on his good shoulder. Don't you ever do that again, do you hear me? Never again. Easy, wildcat. His hand, weak but warm, caught hers. Man can't think with you carrying on. You weren't thinking when you walked into Will's gunfire like some tragic hero in a dime novel. He mentioned Mary. The words were quiet, pained. I saw red. I know. She brought his hand to her lips. I know. They were quiet for a moment. Then, did you mean it? What you said before? Which part? The part where I called you a damned fool? A ghost of a smile. The other part. Clara met his eyes steadily. Every word. Clara. He turned his face away. I'm still wanted. Still Jake Morgan. Nothing's changed. Everything's changed. She turned his face back to her. You almost died. I almost lost you. I don't care about the rest. Your father will be here tomorrow. Jed went rigid. What? I told you. I wrote to him. Told him everything. He's coming to see for himself the man who's kept his daughter safe. He's coming to arrest me. Perhaps. Clara stroked his hair. Or perhaps he's coming to meet the man his daughter loves. You can't love me. But the protest was weak now, worn down by pain and her persistence. I've done too much wrong. Then let me love you right. He closed his eyes, and she saw moisture leak from beneath his lashes. I don't deserve you? Probably not, she agreed, earning a surprised laugh that made him wince. But you're stuck with me anyway. Judge Samuel Whitmore arrived with an escort of federal marshals, his face stern as granite. Clara met him at the door, chin high. Daughter! Father! They regarded each other, two stubborn souls cut from the same cloth. Then Samuel pulled her into his arms. When I got your letter, I thought I'd lost my mind. He murmured into her hair. My Clara, in love with an outlaw. Former outlaw, she corrected, pulling back. And the best man I've ever known. Let me be the judge of that. She led him to Jed's room. Jed had insisted on sitting up, despite Clara's protests. He was pale, weak, but his gray eyes were steady as he met the judge's stern gaze. "Jake Morgan," Samuel said. "Sir, you were part of the Cimarron gang. I was 10 years ago. You're wanted in 3 territories." "Yes, sir." Samuel pulled up a chair, sat heavily. "My daughter says you've changed, that you've spent a decade living honest. I've tried. Trying isn't the same as succeeding." Samuel's voice was sharp as a blade. "The law doesn't care about good intentions." "Father," Clara began. "Quiet." He didn't look at her, kept his eyes on Jed. "Tell me about Mary Daniels." Clara felt Jed flinch. She took his hand, squeezed it. "She was everything good I never deserved," Jed said slowly. "Teacher, helped me learn to read proper, believed I could be better than I was." His voice roughened. "She died because I brought violence to her door. You didn't pull the trigger. Might as well have." Samuel leaned back. "I've been a judge for 20 years. Mr. Morgan, I've sentenced more men than I can count, some to prison, some to hang. You know what I've learned?" Jed shook his head. "There are men who do evil because they enjoy it, and there are men who do evil because they don't know any better, until someone shows them a different way." He studied Jed intently. "Which are you?" Jed swallowed hard. "I was young, angry. Parents died when I was barely walking. Grew up rough, fell in with rough men. It was all I knew until—" He glanced at Clara. "Until I learned there was another way to live. And now I raise cattle, help neighbors, try to balance the scales a little." Jed met Samuel's eyes directly. "I can't change what I did, can't bring back the people hurt by the gang's actions, but I've tried to live different." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat, pulled out a folded paper. "This came for you, Clara, from the territorial governor." Clara took it with trembling hands, read quickly. Her eyes widened. "Father, did you—" "I may have written to some friends," Samuel said gruffly. "Explain the situation. How Mr. Morgan, Mr. Hartwell, helped capture the last of the Cimarron gang. How he was wounded protecting my daughter." "Sir." Jed looked confused. "It's a conditional pardon." Clara breathed. "Based on your assistance in bringing Will Garrison to justice and 10 years of verified good conduct. The marshal in the next county vouched for you," Samuel added. "Seems you've helped him track rustlers more than once. Never mentioned your past, but he knew. Said you were the most honest, dishonest man he'd ever met." Jed stared at the paper like it might bite. I don't understand." "It means you're free," Clara said softly. "Jake Morgan's crimes are pardoned. You can be Jed Hartwell legally now." "Why?" Jed looked at Samuel, genuinely bewildered. "Why would you do this?" Samuel stood, straightened his coat. "Because my daughter loves you. Because you nearly died protecting her, and because—" he paused at the door. "Because I believe in justice. Mr. Hartwell. Sometimes that means punishment. Sometimes it means recognizing when a man has punished himself enough." He left them alone. Clara carefully sat on the bed beside Jed, mindful of his injuries. "Are you all right?" He touched the pardon with shaking fingers. 10 years I've waited for the law to catch up. 10 years of looking over my shoulder." His voice broke. "It's over. It's over." He pulled her down, buried his face in her neck. She felt him shake with silent sobs. 10 years of guilt and fear finally released. She held him, rocked him, murmured wordless comfort. When the storm passed, he pulled back, eyes red but clear. "Your father, he's a good man. The best." Clara agreed. "Though stubborn as a mule. Runs in the family." She swatted him gently. "Be nice, or I'll tell him you prefer his daughter in trousers to fancy dresses." "I prefer his daughter any way I can have her." The words were soft, sincere. "Clara, I still don't have much to offer. Just a hard life on a ranch that barely breaks even. Good thing I've developed a taste for simple things." She kissed him gently. Though I do have conditions, such as a real bed, that narrow thing is torture, a bathtub big enough for two, and windows that actually close properly. Demanding woman. You have no idea. She grew serious. Jed, Jake, whoever you are, I meant what I said. I love all of you, past and present. Just Jed now, he said quietly. Jake Morgan got his pardon. Time to let him rest. He cupped her face. Think you can love a boring rancher named Jed Hartwell? I think I already do. This time when he kissed her, it was different, deeper, tinged with hope instead of desperation. When they parted, both were breathless. Your father's going to expect proper courting, Jed warned. Church socials, chaperoned walks, the whole respectable show. After everything we've been through, Clara laughed. I think we're past propriety. Clara Whitmore, are you suggesting improper behavior? I'm suggesting, she said, trailing her fingers carefully down his chest, mindful of his bandages, that nearly losing you taught me life's too short for conventional timeline. He caught her hand. You deserve better than rushed. You deserve courting and flowers and pretty words. I've had pretty words from pretty men in Denver. They bore me. She laced their fingers together. I want truth. I want partnership. I want to wake up next to you and know we chose each other despite everything. Because of everything, he corrected. I wouldn't be who I am without the past, neither would you. Then here's to complicated histories. She raised their joined hands to her lips. And simpler futures. Outside, her father was deep in conversation with the federal marshals. Through the window, Clara could see him gesturing animatedly, no doubt ensuring every legal detail was handled properly. He caught her eye through the glass, nodded once, approval and warning mixed in equal measure. He's going to make my life difficult, Jed observed. Probably. He's protective. Can't blame him. I'd be the same with our daughter. Clara's breath caught. Our daughter? Color flooded Jed's pale cheeks. I meant... Jed Hartwell, are you thinking about the future? Maybe. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Man can't help but think, lying here with nothing to do but picture possibilities. What kind of possibilities? The kind where I court you proper, marry you in that little church in town, build you a house with windows that close tight, maybe add a room or two for additions. Additions, Clara repeated, warmth flooding through her. I like the sound of additions. Course, that's all dependent on certain things. Such as? Such as you saying yes when I ask. When you ask what? He growled in frustration. You're going to make me do this proper, aren't you? Even flat on my back with a hole in my chest. I think you can manage. Muttering about stubborn women. Jed struggled to sit up straighter. Clara started to help, but he waved her off. No, this I do on my own steam. When he was settled, he took her hand, looked her straight in the eye. Clara Whitmore, you saved my life in more ways than one. You looked past the outlaw to find the man. You gave me hope when I'd forgotten what that felt like. I don't have much, a ranch, some cattle, a past that'll always shadow us some. But what I have is yours. If you'll have me, will you marry me? Clara pretended to consider. I don't know. Father did say I should expect a proper courtship. Clara, and you haven't even met Denver society. How do I know you can handle a fancy dinner party? Clara. Plus, there's the matter of your cooking. Lupita won't stay forever. And I've tasted your attempts at stew. Woman, you're killing me here. She took pity on him. Yes, Jed Hartwell. I'll marry you. His relief was palpable. Thank God. For a moment there. Did you really doubt? Every day since you arrived. He admitted. Keep expecting you to wake up, realize you could do better. Lucky for you, I have terrible judgment. She kissed him softly. The absolute worst. The worst. He agreed against her lips. They stayed like that, quiet and close, planning a future neither had imagined. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the past in pristine white, offering a clean slate for whatever came next. Clara's letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, crumpled and tear-stained. Jed found it on his pillow when he woke, the room empty of her presence for the first time in weeks. His chest, still tender from the slowly healing wound, constricted with a different kind of pain as he read her shaky handwriting. My dearest Jed, Father received word that members of the Cimarron gang escaped during transport to trial. They've made threats. He insists I return to Denver immediately for my safety. I tried to refuse, but he invoked his authority as my father and as a federal judge. The marshals are taking me as I write this. Please don't follow. Please stay safe. I fear this is goodbye. All my love. Clara. The paper crumbled in his fist. Jed was on his feet before the dizziness hit, catching himself against the bedpost. 6 weeks since the shooting, and he still moved like an old man, but Clara was gone, and that was all that mattered. Boss? Tom appeared in the doorway, alerted by the noise. You shouldn't be up. Saddle my horse. Boss, you can barely walk. Then tie me to the damn saddle. Jed grabbed his gun belt, ignored the pull of healing tissue. Miss Clara's in danger. The judge took her back to Denver. She's safe there. She's bait. The certainty crystallized as he spoke. They don't want her father. They want me. She's bait to draw me out. Tom paled. The marshals won't be enough. Not if the gang wants blood. Jed strapped on his colt, muscle memory overriding pain. Get Moses and Eddie. We ride in 10 minutes. Boss, you're in no shape. Jed's glare could have melted steel. The woman I love is in danger because of my past. I'll ride to Denver if I have to crawl there. Now move. The journey to Denver nearly killed him. 3 days of hard riding, nights spent shivering in the cold despite the extra blankets Moses insisted on packing. By the time they reached the city limits, Jed was gray-faced and swaying, held upright by sheer willpower and Tom's supporting arm. Denver had grown since he'd last seen it. Electric lights lined some streets, and buildings rose 3 and 4 stories high. Civilization pressing in from all sides, making him feel exposed, vulnerable. But somewhere in this maze of streets and strangers was Clara. They found lodging at a boarding house on the outskirts, the kind that didn't ask questions if the money was good. Jed sent Eddie to scout the judge's residence while he fought to remain conscious. You need a doctor, Moses said bluntly. I need information. Jed accepted the whiskey Tom offered, used it to chase the fever back. What do we know? Judge Whitmore's got a big house on Sherman Avenue, Eddie reported, returning from his reconnaissance. Saw marshals posted front and back, no sign of Miss Clara, but there's movement inside. Too well guarded for a direct approach. Jed's tactical mind, honed by years of planning robberies, kicked into gear despite his physical weakness. We need another way. Boss, Tom ventured carefully. Maybe we should let the law handle this. The law? Jed laughed bitterly. Boy, I spent 10 years hiding from the law. Now I need to trust them with Clara's life? He shook his head. Find out where she goes. Church, market, anywhere. There has to be a chance to reach her. For 2 days, they watched and waited. Jed's fever broke, his strength returning incrementally. On the 3rd morning, their patience paid off. Clara emerged from the house, accompanied by 2 marshals, dressed in the fine city clothes he remembered from her arrival at the ranch. She looked pale, drawn, beautiful enough to stop his heart. Market District, Eddie murmured, tracking their path. Same route as yesterday. Jed stood carefully. Then that's where we intercept. The market was crowded, perfect for their purposes. Jed pulled his hat low, relied on the intervening months to have changed him enough, thinner now, bearded, marked by recent trials. He moved through the crowd like a ghost, the skills of Jake Morgan serving Jed Hartwell one last time. Clara stood at a flower stall, her guards alert but watching outward for threats. They didn't expect danger to come from within the crowd, from a man who moved like he belonged there. The yellow roses are nice this time of year, Jed said quietly beside her. Clara went rigid. Her hand, reaching for flowers, trembled. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you. Jed, please. Her voice was barely a whisper. They'll arrest you, or worse. Look at me. She turned slightly, and he saw tears tracking down her cheeks. How could you risk this? How could I not? He pretended to examine flowers while speaking urgently. Clara, you're bait. The gang wants me, not your father. I know. The admission was quiet. Father knows too. It's why he has me so heavily guarded. It won't be enough. And what would you have me do? Run? Hide? Live in fear forever? Live free, with me? Jed, I've got a plan. Tomorrow night, there's a society ball at the Grand Hotel. Your father mentioned it, said you'd be attending, showing Denver you're not afraid. How did you... I may have paid a visit to your father. At her shocked look, he almost smiled. Official-like. Presented myself as Jed Hartwell, concerned citizen, offering my services as additional security. He threw me out, but not before I learned what I needed. You spoke to my father. After everything, man's got a right hook like a mule's kick. Jed touched his jaw ruefully. But he also let slip about the ball. Too many people, too many entrances. Security will be stretched thin. You're planning something stupid. Probably. He selected a rose, handed it to her along with the coins. Their fingers brushed, and he felt her shiver. Trust me? With my life, she breathed. But Jed, if something happens to you because of me, then I'll die free, loving you. Better than the alternative. He stepped back as one of the marshals glanced their way. Tomorrow night, be ready. He melted back into the crowd before she could protest, leaving her clutching the yellow rose like a lifeline. The Grand Hotel ballroom glittered with Denver's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms of light across silk gowns and polished boots. Clara entered on her father's arm, her emerald gown matching her eyes but failing to hide the tension in her shoulders. Smile, daughter, Samuel murmured. We're showing them we're not afraid. Aren't we? Clara scanned the crowd, searching for a familiar figure. Using me as bait seems like fear to me. Calculated risk. Every entrance is covered. If they try anything, you'll catch them. I know. She accepted a glass of champagne she had no intention of drinking. And Jed? What happens to him in your plan? Samuel's jaw tightened. Mister, Hartwell made his choice when he came to Denver. I can't protect a man who won't protect himself. The orchestra struck up a waltz. Couples took to the floor in swirls of color and motion. Clara stood with her father, playing the part of the judge's daughter, while her heart raced with anticipation and dread. Then she saw him. Jed stood across the ballroom, and for a moment she didn't recognize him. Clean-shaven, hair trimmed, wearing evening clothes that fit him perfectly. He looked like a gentleman, save for the predatory grace in his movements and the alert tension in his bearing. Their eyes met across the space. He raised his glass slightly, a salute and a signal. Excuse me, Father. Clara set down her champagne. I need some air. Clara, I'll stay where the marshals can see me. She moved through the crowd toward the terrace doors. Behind her, she sensed rather than saw Jed following a parallel path. The marshals tracked her movement but remained at their posts, unwilling to abandon their positions. The terrace was blessedly cool after the ballroom's heat. Clara gripped the stone balustrade, Denver spreading below in a carpet of lights. You clean up well, she said without turning. Jed's voice came from the shadows. Tom's idea. Said if I was going to sweep you off your feet, I should look the part. She turned, drinking in the sight of him. Consider me swept. Good. He stepped into the light, and she saw the lines of pain and exhaustion beneath the formal presentation. Because we need to go. Now. Jed, they're here. Clara, the gang. Not inside. They're too smart for that, but they're watching. Waiting. He took her hand, pulled her deeper into the shadows. There's a service stair at the end of the terrace. Moses has horses waiting. I can't just disappear. Your father will understand when he realizes the alternative. Jed's gray eyes were fierce. They won't wait much longer. Tomorrow, maybe the day after, they'll make their move. And marshals, or no marshals, people will die. So we run, Forever? No, we end it. But on our terms, not theirs. He cupped her face. Trust me? Clara heard shouts from inside the ballroom. Someone had noticed their absence. Time was running out. Yes, she breathed. They ran. Down service stairs, through empty kitchens, out into the alley where Moses waited with horses. Clara hiked up her ball gown, accepting Tom's help to mount. Where? She asked as they rode through darkened streets. The ranch first, Jed replied. Then we make our stand. Behind them, Denver erupted like a kicked anthill, but they were already gone, swallowed by the darkness, racing toward an uncertain dawn. The journey back to Stone Ridge took 2 days of hard riding, switching horses at way stations, doubling back to confuse pursuit. Clara had traded her ball gown for practical clothes. But nothing could ease the fear that gripped her heart, not for herself, but for Jed. He rode like a man possessed, pushing through pain she could see in every line of his body. Whatever healing had occurred was undone by this flight. When they finally stopped to rest, she saw blood seeping through his shirt. You've reopened the wound, she said, reaching for him. He caught her hands. Later, we're not safe yet. Jed, I know they're following. His voice was calm. Certain. 2, maybe 3 days behind. We need to be ready. They reached Stone Ridge as dawn painted the mountains crimson. The ranch looked exactly as they'd left it, peaceful, isolated, vulnerable. Home, Clara whispered, surprised by how much the word meant. Not for long. Jed dismounted stiffly, immediately beginning to issue orders. Tom, ride to town. Tell Sheriff Watson everything. If he's the lawman I think he is, he'll come. And if he doesn't, Moses asked, then we handle it ourselves. Jed's smile was sharp. Wouldn't be the first time. They spent the day preparing. Jed, despite Clara's protests, insisted on checking every approach, every defensive position. Eddie and Moses cleaned weapons, counted ammunition. Tom returned near dusk with mixed news. Sheriff's coming, but not till morning. Says he needs to deputize men. Make it legal. Jed nodded as if he'd expected this. Then we holed through the night. Clara found him later, standing at the window of what had been her room, watching the sun set behind the mountains. It's beautiful, she said, joining him. It is. But he wasn't looking at the view. Clara, I need you to promise me something. No? You don't even know what I'm asking. You're going to ask me to run if things go badly. To save myself. She turned to face him. The answer is no. Clara, I chose this. Jed chose you. For better or worse. We're not married yet? Technicality. She moved into his arms, careful of his injury. I'm not leaving you. Not again. He held her tightly, burying his face in her hair. Stubborn woman. You love me for it. God help me, I do. They stood together, watching night fall over the valley. Somewhere out there, death was riding toward them. But for this moment, they had each other, and it was enough. The attack came just before dawn. Clara had never known cold like this. The mountain cave was a far cry from the ranch house, with its massive fireplace and thick walls. Here, wind whistled through cracks in the stone, and their small fire barely held back the chill. She pressed closer to Jed's unconscious form, trying to share what little warmth she had. He'd been delirious for 2 days now. The gunshot wound from their flight fevered and angry. The crude bandages she'd fashioned from her petticoat were soaked through again. She needed proper medical supplies, clean water, medicines, none of which existed in this remote hideaway. Should have listened, Jed muttered, lost in fever dreams. Should have sent her away. Hush. Clara wiped his burning face with a damp cloth. Save your strength. They'd barely escaped the ranch alive. The attack had come from all sides, not just Will's remaining men, but new faces, drawn by the promise of revenge or bounty. Jed had fought like a man possessed, holding them off while Clara gathered what supplies she could. But a lucky shot had caught him as they fled, and now they were trapped in this cave, winter closing in. with Jed dying by degrees. Clara checked their meager supplies again. 2 days of food if she stretched it, ammunition running low. The horses were hidden in a small canyon below. But for how long? Their tracks would be covered by the fresh snowfall. But determined hunters would find them eventually. She'd discovered the cave by accident, remembering Jed mentioning it once as an old hideout from his outlaw days. The irony wasn't lost on her. Jake Morgan's refuge becoming Jed Hartwell's last stand. Mary? Clara's heart clenched. He'd been calling for his dead fiancée more frequently. No, it's Clara. I'm here. His eyes opened, struggled to focus. Clara, you're safe? Yes. She smoothed his hair back. We're both safe. Liar? A ghost of his old smile. Always were a terrible liar. Rest, please. Need to tell you. He gripped her hand with surprising strength. In my saddlebag. The leather pouch. If something happens, nothing's going to happen. Clara, please. She retrieved the pouch. Found papers inside. By the firelight, she read what Jed had been carrying. Deeds, bank documents, a will dated just days ago in Denver. You're leaving me the ranch? Her voice broke. It's yours anyway. Just making it legal. His breathing was labored. Tom knows what to do. Good kid. He'll help you. Stop talking like you're dying. Aren't I? The question was soft, matter of fact. Feel like it? No. Clara set the papers aside, cupped his face. You're going to recover. We're going to get married in that little church. Build that house with windows that close properly. Have those additions we talked about. Like that dream. His eyes drifted shut. Keep having that dream. Clara held him as he slipped back into fevered sleep, her tears falling silently. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing, and she thought she heard wolves in the distance, or perhaps men. These days, it was hard to tell the difference. She must have dozed, because she woke to the sound of horses, heart pounding. She reached for Jed's rifle, positioned herself between him and the cave entrance. If they'd found them, she'd make them pay dearly. Miss Clara, you in there? Tom's voice. Clara nearly sobbed with relief. Tom, yes, but come slowly. I'm armed. The young cowhand appeared at the cave mouth, hands visible. Behind him, she saw Moses and, blessed sight, Dr. Morrison from town. How? She managed. Sheriff Watson's been tracking the gang, Tom explained as the doctor immediately went to Jed. Caught most of them 2 days ago. The rest scattered. We've been searching for you since... Doctor. Morrison's examination was thorough and grim. Infection set in deep. I need to operate. Remove the bullet properly. But not here. We need to get him somewhere warm. Clean. The ranch, Clara asked. Burned, Moses said quietly. They torched it before the sheriff arrived. Clara closed her eyes, absorbed this new blow. Their home. Gone. But Jed was alive, and that was all that mattered. There's an old line shack about 5 miles east, Tom offered. It's not much, but it's shelter. It'll have to do. Doctor. Morrison began preparing Jed for transport. Every hour counts now. The journey to the line shack was a nightmare of careful movement and constant vigilance. Clara rode with Jed cradled against her, feeling every labored breath. The shack, when they reached it, was indeed rudimentary. 1 room, a fireplace, bare necessities. But it was shelter, and Moses quickly got a fire roaring. Doctor. Morrison worked through the night. Clara assisted, holding Jed still during the worst of it, murmuring comfort when he cried out. The bullet came out in pieces, followed by a flow of infection that made the doctor curse. I've done what I can, he said finally, washing blood from his hands. The rest is up to him, and the Almighty. Clara took up her vigil again, bathing Jed's face, forcing water between his lips, talking to anchor him to life. She told him about the future they'd have, the children who'd run through meadows where the ranch once stood, the new house they'd build from the ashes. Can't build with ashes, he mumbled once, almost lucid. Watch me, she replied. On the 3rd day, his fever broke. Clara woke from an exhausted doze to find gray eyes watching her with clarity for the first time in a week. "You look terrible," he whispered. She laughed, cried, possibly hit him, everything blurred together. "Don't ever scare me like that again." Wasn't planning the first time. He tried to sit up, grimaced. "The ranch? Gone, I'm sorry." He was quiet for a moment. "Just buildings. We'll make new ones. With windows that close properly." "With windows that close properly," he confirmed. Then, "Clara, in the cave, I said things. You were feverish." "No, I meant them." He caught her hand. "If I died, but you didn't. But I could have, and you'd have been alone, unprotected." His grip tightened. "We need to be practical. The ranch is gone. I've got nothing. You have me. That's everything." She leaned down, kissed him softly. "The rest is just details." Sheriff Watson arrived that afternoon with news. "Got 'em all. Those that survived are on their way to federal prison. Won't be troubling you again." "And Jake Morgan?" Jed asked quietly. The sheriff studied him for a long moment. "Jake Morgan died in that cave. Far as I'm concerned, all I see here is Jed Hartwell, local rancher who helped bring in a dangerous gang." He touched his hat. "Judge Whitmore sends his regards. By the way, says to tell his daughter he expects a spring wedding. Something about not wanting her living in sin all winter." Clara blushed. Jed actually laughed, then winced as it pulled his wounds. "Tell the judge," Jed said carefully, "that I'd be honored to make an honest woman of his daughter. Soon as I can stand upright, I'll do that." Watson paused at the door. "Good to have you back, Jed, both of you." Winter settled over the mountains like a benediction. They stayed in the line shack while Jed healed, Tom and Moses bringing supplies and news from town. The community, it seemed, had taken up a collection. Lumber was being gathered, plans drawn. Come spring, Stone Ridge would rise again. "They don't even know me." Jed marveled when Tom delivered another wagon of donated goods. "They know you saved Miss Clara." Tom said simply, "And that you stood against the gang. That's enough." Clara watched Jed struggle with this acceptance, this belonging he'd never expected. The isolated man she'd first met was learning, slowly, to be part of something larger. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Jed pulled out a familiar object, the photograph of Mary he'd carried for 10 years. "I want to tell you about her," he said quietly. "Properly. She deserves that." So Clara listened as he talked about the schoolteacher who'd seen past the outlaw, who'd believed in redemption before he'd understood what the word meant. He spoke of dreams deferred, of a wedding that never happened, of guilt that had shaped a decade of his life. "She'd have liked you," he said finally. "Would have said you were good for me. Too good, probably." "I think," Clara said carefully, "she'd be glad you found happiness, that her death wasn't the end of your story." Jed studied the photograph for a long moment, then placed it in the fire. They watched it curl and blacken, the past transforming into smoke and memory. "Jake Morgan's dead," he said softly. "Has been for a while. Time to let him rest." Clara took his hand, held it as they watched the fire. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in pristine white. But inside the small shack, warmth and love held winter at bay. "I love you, Jed Hartwell," she said. "And I love you, Clara, soon to be Hartwell." He pulled her close. "Windows and all." She laughed, the sound bright in the quiet night. "Especially the windows." They began making new plans that night, not just for buildings and fences, but for a life together. The past would always be with them, in Jed's scars, in the wariness that never quite left his eyes, in the hard-won wisdom they both carried, but it no longer defined them. As winter deepened, Clara wrote to her father, not the desperate letter of before, but one filled with hope and plans and requests for his blessing. She wrote of the man Jed had become, of the community that had embraced them, of the future they were building from the ashes of the past. Samuel's response came by return mail. Daughter, any man who can make you choose a one-room shack over Denver society must be something special. Your mother would be scandalized. She would also, I think, approve, be happy. He gives his blessing. Clara told Jed, finding him working on plans for the new house despite doctor's orders to rest. Good. Wouldn't want to face him at the altar without it. Jed showed her the sketches. Look, windows that close properly, just as promised. And the bathtub? Big enough for two. He grinned at her shocked expression. What? Man's gotta have dreams. Clara kissed him then, pouring all her love and hope and promise into the connection. When they parted, both were breathless. Spring can't come soon enough? She murmured. No, he agreed, pulling her back for another kiss. But we've got all winter to practice being married. Scandalous. Mr. Hartwell, practical. Future Mrs. Hartwell, very practical. Outside, the mountain winter raged on. But inside their small shelter, summer had already arrived, warm and golden and full of promise. The past was ashes, but from ashes, new growth always came. And in the spring, when wildflowers bloomed among the ruins of the old ranch, they would build again. Better, stronger, together. It was enough. It was everything. It was home. The news of Jed's capture reached Clara at the worst possible moment. She was in town, purchasing supplies for the rebuilding effort, when Sheriff Watson approached with a grim expression. Miss Clara, I need to speak with you. Her heart plummeted. What's happened? Federal marshals took Jed this morning. Someone sent word to Denver about his past, about who he really was. The world tilted. Clara gripped the counter of the general store. But the pardon was conditional on good behavior and technically fleeing Denver with you. Watson looked miserable. They're saying he violated the terms. Where is he? County jail for now, but they're moving him to Denver tomorrow for trial. Clara was already moving. I need to see him. The jail was a squat stone building that smelled of despair and unwashed bodies. The deputy led her to the back cells, where Jed sat on a narrow cot, head in his hands. Jed, he looked up, and her heart broke at the defeat in his eyes. You shouldn't be here. Where else would I be? She gripped the bars. We'll fight this. Father will. Your father is the one who signed the arrest warrant. His voice was flat. Seems he reconsidered once you were safe. No, he wouldn't. But even as she denied it, Clara remembered her father's fury when she'd fled Denver. His cold declaration that Jed had made his choice. Go home, Clara. Don't you dare give up on me. Her voice cracked. Don't you dare. I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. He rose, came to the bars. That life we planned, the house, the children, it was a beautiful dream. But men like me don't get happy endings. Stop it. Find someone worthy of you, someone without blood on their hands. I already have. She reached through the bars, touched his face. And I'm not letting him go. The deputy cleared his throat. Time's up, miss. Clara left the jail with steel in her spine and fire in her heart. If her father thought she'd accept this quietly, he'd forgotten who raised her. She sent telegrams first, to every lawyer she could think of, every judge who owed her father favors, every newspaper editor who might listen. Then she did something that would have shocked Denver society. She went to the saloon. The Silver Dollar was the kind of establishment proper ladies didn't enter. Clara walked in like she owned the place, ignoring the startled looks and dropped jaws. I need to speak with anyone who's had dealings with Jed Hartwell, she announced. Anyone he's helped, anyone who knows the man he's become. Silence greeted her. Then, slowly, a grizzled miner stood. He helped me out last winter, found me half froze, took me to Doc Morrison, paid for the treatment too, helped my widow's sister keep her farm. Another added. Wouldn't take no payment neither. One by one, they came forward with stories. The reformed outlaw who'd become an unlikely guardian angel to the desperate and downtrodden. By the time Clara left, She had 24 names willing to testify to Jed's character. But would it be enough? The trial was set for the following week in Denver. Clara arrived to find the courthouse packed, the story of the judge's daughter and the reformed outlaw having captured public imagination. Her father sat at the prosecutor's table, refusing to meet her eyes. All rise for Judge Harrison. Clara stood with the rest, her gaze fixed on Jed. They'd cleaned him up for trial, but shackles bound his wrists and ankles. He looked older, worn down by the weight of inevitability. The prosecutor, not her father, thankfully, but his colleague, laid out the case methodically. Jake Morgan's crimes, the conditional nature of the pardon, the violation when he'd fled Denver with Clara. The defendant shows a pattern of disregard for the law, he concluded. Pardoned once, he immediately reverted to his criminal nature. Kidnapping Judge Whitmore's daughter? Objection! Clara was on her feet before Jed's lawyer could speak. I wasn't kidnapped. I went willingly. Judge Harrison's gavel cracked down. Young lady, you're not a witness here. Then make me one. Clara stepped forward. I have information crucial to this case. Your Honor. The prosecutor protested. Miss Whitmore is clearly biased. As is Judge Whitmore. Clara shot back. Yet his testimony is being accepted. A murmur ran through the gallery. Judge Harrison looked between Clara and her stone-faced father. This is highly irregular. So is prosecuting a man for protecting the woman he loves. Clara replied. After much deliberation, she was allowed to testify. Clara took the stand, aware of every eye in the room, especially Jed's, which held a mixture of pride and despair. She told the story from the beginning, the threats against her father, her arrival at Stone Ridge, the man who'd grudgingly protected her, then saved her life, then stolen her heart. She spoke of his nightmares, his guilt, his decade of atonement. Jake Morgan died 10 years ago in Amarillo. She concluded, the man in those shackles is Jed Hartwell, and he's the best man I've ever known. Even better than your father? The prosecutor asked snidely. Clara met her father's eyes for the first time. My father taught me about justice. Jed taught me about mercy. Both are necessary. But mercy, her voice softened. Mercy is what makes us human. The character witnesses came next. Tom, Moses, and Eddie from the ranch. Sheriff Watson, reluctant but honest. The townspeople Clara had gathered, one by one testifying to Jed's quiet acts of kindness. Then, unexpectedly, a final witness. I'd like to speak. Everyone turned. A woman stood in the gallery, middle-aged, worn but dignified. Clara didn't recognize her, but Jed went white. State your name for the record. Judge Harrison instructed, Margaret Daniels. Mary Daniels was my daughter. The courtroom erupted. Clara felt the world shift, watched Jed slump in his chair as if struck. Order restored. Margaret Daniels took the stand. She looked directly at Jed as she spoke. My Mary loved Jake Morgan, saw something in him worth saving. When she died? Her voice caught. When she died, I wanted someone to blame. For years, I hated him. Clara held her breath. But hate's a poison. Eats you alive. So I started asking questions. Learned about the man Jake became after Amarillo, Jed Hartwell. She turned to the judge. My daughter believed in redemption. Your Honor, believed people could change. If I can forgive the man whose past led to her death, surely the law can too. When she stepped down, she paused by Jed's table, reached out, touched his shackled hand briefly. No words were needed. Judge Harrison called a recess. Clara found herself in the hallway with her father for the first time since she'd fled Denver. Quite a performance, Samuel said coldly. It wasn't a performance. Every word was true. He's a criminal. Clara, no amount of good deeds changes that. You're wrong. Clara lifted her chin. And Mother would be ashamed of you. He flinched as if slapped. Don't you dare. She believed in second chances. It's why she married you. At his shocked look, Clara pressed on. Did you think I didn't know? About your gambling debts? The disgrace that drove you west? She took a chance on a disgraced lawyer, helped him become a respected judge, and now you deny another man the same grace. Samuel aged 10 years before her eyes. Clara, I love him, Father, and if you send him to prison, you'll lose me forever. She left him standing there and returned to the courtroom for the verdict. Judge Harrison was thorough in his deliberation. He reviewed Jake Morgan's crimes, acknowledged the conditional pardon, examined the alleged violation. However, he continued, the court must also consider the spirit of the law, not merely its letter. The pardon was granted in recognition of Mr. Morgan's reformation. The evidence presented suggests that reformation was genuine and continued. Clara gripped the gallery rail. Furthermore, the alleged kidnapping appears to have been a mutual decision made under extraordinary circumstances, with the safety of Miss Whitmore as the paramount concern. Jed sat straighter. It is the judgment of this court that while Mr. Hartwell showed poor judgment in fleeing Denver, his actions were motivated by love and protective instinct rather than criminal intent. The conditional pardon stands. Mr. Hartwell, you are free to go. The courtroom erupted. Clara was over the gallery rail before anyone could stop her, throwing herself into Jed's arms as the bailiff unlocked his shackles. Told you not to give up on me, she whispered against his neck. Never again, he promised, holding her as if she might disappear. When they finally separated, Margaret Daniels approached. Jed straightened, uncertainty written across his face. Ma'am, Mary saw who you could be, she said simply. I'm glad she was right. She looked at Clara. Be happy, both of you. It's what she would have wanted. She left before they could respond, dignity intact despite the tears on her cheeks. Samuel approached last. When the courtroom had mostly cleared, father and daughter regarded each other warily. Your mother would be proud, he said finally. You fought for what you believed in. I learned from the best. He turned to Jed. I was wrong. My grief over losing Clara to danger made me... He stopped, started again. You saved my daughter. You love my daughter. That should have been enough. Jed met his gaze steadily. I understand, sir. A father's fear, a father's anger. I'd feel the same. Samuel extended his hand. After a moment, Jed shook it. The offer of a spring wedding stands, Samuel said gruffly, though I suspect Clara won't wait that long. You suspect correctly. Clara informed him. Both men smiled, the first shared moment of understanding between them. Outside the courthouse, Denver stretched before them. But Clara's thoughts were already turning toward home, the real home they'd build together at Stone Ridge. It's over, Jed said wonderingly. Really over? No, Clara corrected, taking his arm. It's just beginning. They walked down the courthouse steps together, into a future that had been bought with pain, tested by fire, and proven in a court of law. Jake Morgan was truly dead. In his place stood Jed Hartwell, rancher, protector, and soon-to-be husband. The past would always be part of their story, but it no longer had the power to destroy their future. As they reached the street, snow began to fall, clean, white, full of promise. Clara tipped her face up to catch the flakes, laughing at the simple joy of it. What are you thinking? Jed asked, watching her with soft eyes. I'm thinking we should stop by that church on the way home, see if the Reverend is available. Clara Whitmore, are you suggesting we get married today? Why wait? We've wasted enough time already. He pulled her close, kissed her there on the Denver street, scandalizing passing matrons and delighting small boys. Reverend it is, he agreed when they parted. Though your father will have our hides. Let him. We'll name our first son after him. That should soothe his pride. Already planning children? Planning everything. She smiled up at him. We have a lot of life to make up for. Hand in hand, they headed for the church, leaving the courthouse and all it represented behind. Somewhere, Mary Daniels and Elizabeth Whitmore were smiling, and in the hearts of a judge's daughter and a reformed outlaw, love had finally won its case. The morning sun cast long shadows across the valley as Clara stood before the newly built cabin. her hand resting protectively over her growing belly. 6 months had passed since their impromptu wedding in Denver. 6 months of hard work and harder choices as they rebuilt Stone Ridge from ashes. "You shouldn't be lifting those," Jed said, appearing at her side to take the water buckets from her hands. "I'm pregnant. Not invalid," Clara protested, but let him take them. She'd learned to pick her battles, and Jed's protective streak had only intensified since Dr. Morrison confirmed her condition. "Humor me," he said, kissing her temple. "Bad enough you insist on helping with the cattle. Someone has to keep the books straight. Your handwriting is atrocious. My handwriting is fine. For a doctor writing prescriptions, perhaps." Their gentle bickering was interrupted by the sound of approaching riders. Jed tensed automatically, hand moving to his hip where a gun no longer resided. Old habits died hard, even in peacetime. But the riders were familiar, Tom leading, followed by Moses and Eddie, and, surprisingly, Judge Samuel Whitmore. "Father?" Clara moved forward as Samuel dismounted. "We weren't expecting you for another month. Couldn't miss the barn raising," Samuel said gruffly, embracing his daughter carefully. "Besides, I have news." They gathered in the cabin's main room, still smelling of fresh pine and possibility. Clara served coffee while Samuel produced a leather portfolio from his saddlebags. "The territorial governor signed this yesterday," he announced, spreading documents on the rough table. "Official commendation for Jed Hartwell, recognizing his role in bringing the Cimarron gang to justice. Full restoration of civil rights, and," he paused for effect, "an appointment as auxiliary territorial marshal, if you want it." Jed stared at the papers. "Marshal? They want to make me a lawman? Ironic, isn't it?" Samuel's eyes twinkled. "The governor feels your unique background could be useful. Who better to track outlaws than someone who understands how they think?" "I'm a rancher now," Jed said slowly. "Got responsibilities here." "It's not a full-time position," Samuel clarified. "Only when needed, for special cases. The pay would help with the ranch." Clara watched her husband wrestle with this unexpected development. She knew the part of him that craved redemption was tempted. What better way to balance the scales than by bringing other outlaws to justice? But she also knew his fear of leaving her, especially now. "We'll think about it," she said diplomatically. "Thank you, Father." The barn raising the next day drew neighbors from 50 miles around. What had started as a simple construction project became a celebration of community and new beginnings. Women arrived with covered dishes and gossip, men with tools and strong backs, children with laughter and mischief. Clara watched from the porch as Jed worked alongside the other men, directing the raising of massive beams with quiet authority. Gone was the isolated, bitter man she'd first met. In his place stood someone who belonged, who was part of something larger than his own guilt and pain. "He's changed," Margaret Daniels said, joining Clara on the porch. She'd moved to the area recently, opening a small school in town. Mary would be pleased. "You've changed too," Clara observed. "Finding peace. Finding purpose," Margaret corrected. "Teaching again, shaping young minds. It's what Mary would have wanted." They watched in companionable silence as the barn took shape. By sunset, it stood complete, a testament to what community could accomplish. The celebration continued into the evening, lanterns strung between trees, fiddle music filling the air. Clara found Jed standing apart, watching the dancers with a contemplative expression. "Regrets?" she asked, slipping her arm through his. "No," he said immediately, then reconsidered. "Maybe one. What's that? I never learned to dance proper. Can't give my wife what she deserves." Clara laughed. "Jed Hartwell? Are you saying you want to learn?" "Maybe, if you'd teach me. Right now. Why not?" So there, in the shadow of their new barn, Clara taught her husband to waltz. He was clumsy at first, stepping on her feet, muttering apologies. But gradually he found the rhythm, moving with the same natural grace that governed all his actions. "See," Clara said as they swayed together, "you're a natural. Got a good teacher. He spun her carefully, mindful of her condition. "Clara, about that marshal position. You want to accept. Part of me does," he admitted. "Not for the glory or even the redemption, but because maybe I could stop someone else from making my mistakes. Help some young fool before he ruins his life. Then accept." "What about you, the baby? I can't leave you." "You won't be leaving us. You'll be protecting us. All of us." She placed his hand on her belly. "This child deserves a world with fewer outlaws and more reformed men like his father. His or hers. Either way, they'll need an example to follow. What better example than a man who chose justice over easy wrong?" Jed was quiet for a long moment. "How did I get so lucky? Luck had nothing to do with it." Clara reached up to touch the scar on his temple, souvenir of that long-ago fall. "We earned this happiness, both of us, pain by pain, choice by choice." The music changed to something slower, sweeter. Other couples joined them in the impromptu dance floor beneath the stars. Samuel danced with Lupita. Tom shyly asked the blacksmith's daughter. Even Moses convinced Margaret to take a turn. "Look at that," Jed murmured. "A judge, a Mexican cook, a reformed outlaw, a former slave, and the mother of my past. All dancing together like equals. That's the West for you." Clara replied, "Everyone gets a second chance. Some of us get third and fourth chances, too. Good thing. First time I met you, I thought you were an insufferable ass. First time I met you, I thought you were a spoiled city brat. And now? Now I know you're a spoiled city brat." He laughed at her mock outrage, spinning her again. "My spoiled city brat. Wouldn't have you any other way." The party continued late into the night, but Clara and Jed slipped away early. They walked hand in hand to the rise overlooking the valley, where a small cemetery held fresh markers. They'd buried the past here, literally, the ashes of the burned ranch house, the wanted posters Clara had saved, even Jed's old gun. "Think they're watching?" Clara asked softly. "Mary and my mother?" "I hope so." Jed wrapped his arms around her from behind, hands splaying protectively over their unborn child. "Want them to see we didn't waste their sacrifice." They stood there as the moon rose full and bright, illuminating their domain. The new cabin, sturdy and welcoming. The barn, raised by community hands. The corral where horses moved like shadows. Gardens Clara had planted, dormant now but holding promise of spring growth. "I've been thinking about names." Clara said, "If it's a boy, Samuel Jed, for both our fathers. Your father's still alive, but yours shaped who you became, even in absence, the man you didn't want to be." Jed considered this. "And if it's a girl, Mary Elizabeth, for the women who couldn't be here but made us who we are." "Perfect." He turned her in his arms, studied her face in the moonlight. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Only a dozen times. Not nearly enough." He kissed her softly. "I love you, Clara Hartwell. Love our life, our future, our baby. Love every impossible bit of this second chance." "Third chance," she corrected. Or fourth. I've lost count. Let's just call it our last chance and make it stick." "Deal." They made their way back to the cabin, leaving the ghosts to their moonlit vigil. Inside, warmth and light waited. The fire Jed had banked, the quilts Clara had sewn, the Bible Samuel had gifted them, with significantly fewer threats than his first visit. As Clara settled into bed, Jed sat at the rough desk, studying the marshal appointment by lamplight. "You'll accept?" Clara asked sleepily. "First thing tomorrow." He set the papers aside, joined her in bed. "But tonight, I'm just Jed Hartwell, rancher and expectant father. And husband. Don't forget husband. Never." He pulled her close, hand finding her belly again. "That's the title I'm proudest of." Outside, wind sang through the valley, but the windows, properly sealed as promised, kept the cold at bay. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, answered by its pack, but the sound no longer seemed threatening. It was just another voice in the western night, calling to its family, celebrating survival against all odds. "Jed?" Clara murmured, already half asleep. "We did it. We're home." "Yeah," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. "We're home." As sleep took them, the fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls, on the mantel. 2 photographs sat side by side. One of a young schoolteacher with kind eyes, one of Clara, in her wedding dress. Jed beside her, looking stunned by his good fortune, the past and present, reconciled at last, and in Clara's womb, the future grew steadily, heir to a legacy of redemption, courage, and love that conquered all. Spring would come soon, bringing new life to the valley. The cattle would grow fat on fresh grass. The garden would burst with growth, and a baby's cry would echo through rooms built by loving hands. Jed would ride out sometimes on martial business, but he'd always come home to Clara's arms and their child's laughter. Stone Ridge Ranch would prosper, becoming a testament to what 2 broken people could build together. Visitors would come seeking the famous reformed outlaw and the judge's daughter who'd tamed him, only to find an ordinary couple living in extraordinary love. But that was all still to come. For now, in the quiet of a winter night, they slept peacefully in their hard-won happiness, proof that sometimes the best endings are actually beginnings in disguise. The West had given them its greatest gift, the chance to write their own story, and they'd written it in courage, in forgiveness, and most of all, in love. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Clara and Jed's journey touched your heart as much as it did mine. Where are you listening from? I'd love to know. Drop a comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more tales of romance and redemption from the American frontier. What did you think of Clara and Jed's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time, partners.